What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from the Quartering, and it would appear that the $4 billion man, Tim Sweeney, he might not be afraid of China, but he's definitely afraid of a fat bearded man in his basement. Now, some of you who are following me on Twitter at the Quartering knew that I had secured, at least in principle, an interview with Tim Sweeney, whether it was going to be at GDC, whether it was going to be, informally in the DMs or whatever the case may be. And perhaps I made a mistake by announcing it publicly. I forget that there is in fact a group of people that follow me around and obsess over me. In particular, game journos who I've dunked on before. Patsy's milkshake loving people like Kirk McKeon, who respond obsessively to everything I do because he secretly wishes that he had the reach I did as a games journo. People like Patrick Klepek of Waypoint, which I've dedicated an entire video to because it requires that much dunking, and others. So Tim had responded to me in the DMs that he'd be interested in talking. I was very excited because I wanted to talk to him about the statement that he had made saying that, unlike Blizzard, Epic Games says it won't ban players for political speech. Meaning, essentially, if somebody were on stage and they were to yell something out like Blitzchung did, there would be no penalties. This is something that I strongly doubt and doubted, which is why that conversation would have been awesome. All that would have needed to happen to prove it was somebody in a big Fortnite event yelling something out in their victory interview, and I guess we would have known. We would have known it because it would have been put to the test. Now, the reason a lot of people didn't believe Tim Sweeney is because his company's 40% owned by Tencent, and he has been consistent saying that he supports free speech and he doesn't take orders from China. In fact, in this tweet, on the original announcement on October 9th or 10th, he said, Epic supports everyone's right to speak freely. China players of Fortnite are free to criticize the US or criticize Epic just as equally as others. Now, this is a vague statement because it's not like Blizzard has come out and said that their players aren't allowed to do that. The question was, the context was, if they did it during a live event, what would you do? And by the way, why don't these esports people put everything on a delay? I mean, TV's been doing it for years. It seems like such an easy problem to fix this, but that's neither here nor there. So I was excited to get a chance to talk to Tim Sweeney, the $4 billion man. I had several questions about the launcher, as I have been a vocal critic of the Epic launcher, and he, at least for the time, seemed like a guy that was willing to talk. But as it turns out, it took just minutes after I announced our interview for my stalkers to descend upon Tim and bully him into backing out of the interview. It's funny to me that he's not afraid of China, but he's afraid of a few blue-haired journos. Now, interestingly enough, the initial tweet that kind of set everything off, this guy has gone into hiding. He has privated his account. He's blocked everybody. And I wonder why. He called me things like a serial harasser, a misogynist, things that are obviously not true. And it's interesting. Now, I don't believe I've ever been guilty of these things, and there's been no evidence of such. However, every time I talk to an industry person, the same group of people get in there and deplatform me. I wonder what they would call their behavior. It's so interesting to me that journalists are so scared of me taking an interview, of Tim Sweeney taking an interview, that they would bully the guy, that they would demand he cancel the interview, that they would demand he deplatform me. Guys like Kirk McKeon, who blockchains me, but obsesses over me. It's a curious relationship, if I'm being honest. Kirk is a guy whose Twitter feed is full of obsessive tweets about me. Now, if I were soft like Kirk, I would say that he's harassing me, that he is a video games journalist who is harassing a fellow commentator. You could see him saying, absolutely unreal that Tim Sweeney would give legitimacy to a serial harasser. Coming from Kirk, who obsesses about me. Thank God when Tim Sweeney had decided to back out. So you got what you wanted. Epic, big brain, free speech journalist Kirk McKeand. I guess you've got me deplatformed. And many other industry people who I've been critical of were jumping into the conversation to misrepresent me. And now, I don't necessarily blame Tim Sweeney for this. Look, the guy is a literal billionaire in charge of one of the biggest games maybe ever. Maybe the biggest game ever. It's hard, I don't know the exact numbers, but certainly the biggest game of our time. He doesn't have time to do research, although he did say he watched some of my videos and that he is not a fan of cancel culture. Well, if you watched my videos, Tim, you know that I vehemently oppose cancel culture and I support it. I mean, I don't support it. I denounce it. Sorry. No, I just watched some of his vids. I don't support cancel culture, and I don't support an edgelord style of presentation, as both inflame situations and break down the professional versus personal boundaries which keep the world sane. So you don't support cancel culture, but all it took was a relative nobody to lie about me to get you to back out. You see here, I apologize. I mistook the quartering for an ordinary industry pundit / epic critic. There's no evidence of anything otherwise. What was contained in a tweet that is now hidden because he's such a hero is a out of context paragraph from either the Kotaku or the Polygon article about the stupid cosplay thing in Magic the Gathering, an industry that is, an incident that is long gone. The cosplayer and I have already made up. Everything's fine. But he doesn't have time to do that research. He says, he DM'd me and I responded with the topic that maybe we could chat about stuff for later at GDC. That is what he said. Should one avoid associating with an influencer because of disagreement with their views? I'm not sold on that idea. A conversation isn't an endorsement, but an opportunity to provide a competing viewpoint that might persuade listeners. This is why I wanted to talk to you, Tim. I wanted to levy some of my viewers' biggest questions about the Epic Game Store, and in particular talk to you about your positions on free speech in terms of Fortnite. And I suppose we could have talked about the genius marketing that you had this weekend. None of that's going to happen. And look, obviously I'm fine. This is all started by Steve Blondkamp, who has now privated his account. I suppose if he really believed what he said, he would stand by it, but he has instead decided to go into hiding as he has accomplished his goal, and that is to deplatform me. It's really sad that these industry losers are so obsessed with deplatforming anyone who might compete with them. See, I think that a lot of this comes from an insecurity, a feeling of inferiority from people like McKeand or Steve Blondkamp or all these other journos who were chiming in. And they're right. They are vastly inferior to me in many ways, both in personality, both in reach, and their own moral compasses. But why should their failures as basic human beings be my fault? It's not going to hurt me that Tim Sweeney isn't doing an interview with me. I'm not a game journo. I don't need Tim Sweeney to interview me. I don't do interviews. That's what legacy game media does, and that's fine. Nobody reads that stuff anyway. But it's frustrating to me that these replies are filled with people flat out lying. Tim Sweeney saying, "Oh wow, there's some horrible stuff in there. Sorry, I had no idea. At a quick glance, I'd assume the site was some sort of general r/screw epic style industry criticism." The site? I've talked about Epic Games a handful of times. I dislike many things about it. And Tim Sweeney is somebody that probably shouldn't be on Twitter, although, you know, it's cool and all. But you get people... I appreciate that you reevaluated. The Quartering is actively trying to harm people he disagrees with, and that's not great. Again, evidence, please. 57 replies to that. Didn't turn out well, did it? He will give you a tough but fair interview. He has some hot takes, but watch his actual interviews. Jeremy's as milquetoast as Tim Pool, if not more so. Why don't you actually do the interview and talk to the man directly, then listen to all of these jerks talk thinking they matter? Now, I absolutely understand that Tim Sweeney has no issue, has no time to dive in, deeply understand a rando on the internet. I don't blame Tim for backing out. I mean, it appears as cowardly to me because he so strongly says he supports opposing viewpoints and he's willing to believe Kotaku's hit piece on me from years ago rather than ask me directly about it. But I get it. He's a billionaire. He doesn't have time. The frustrating thing about this is these deplatforming legacy journos will see this as some sort of victory. Meanwhile, they languish away, begging their customers for money and getting just a fraction of what even the most average YouTube commentator gets covering the same topics they do. That's fine by me. They can continue to fade into obscurity and they can continue to show their true selves by demanding the deplatforming of their competition. We all see you for what you are, cowards in a dying industry, flailing away for any remaining piece of relevance. Enjoy it while it lasts, losers. I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you again real soon.